Good morning, everyone. We're meeting for our Zoom conference, a Genie seminar, and we're going to take another one of the word switches, one of the 7+2 word switches today to discuss. And we'll just begin by reminding everyone that this meeting is recorded, so anything that you say may be public. Our earlier meetings are already available on the internet just for your own interest. Sharad has put them on the internet. And in the past several meetings, we've discussed two of the most powerful love creation skills that teach the golden rule, the emotional self-endorsement and the reasonable best measure of self-worth. Those we've started with. And then we've started on the first word switch, which is I think I can, the word switch that's the energy switch that turns on our energy to focus on puzzle solving. And we discussed the second word switch was I allow instead of they make me. The I allow word switch, you recall, is the word switch that says we take responsibility for ourselves, and most importantly, we stop the blaming. Instead of he, she, they, or it make me, when we say I allow, we're accepting that we are responsible for our daily activities and the way we experience our world. The third switch was the I could for I should word switch. If you recall, the I should is what we learn as kids. It's everything that other people tell us is the way we should think and be and act. And the I could word switch takes us to our puzzle solving brain where it invites us to be creative. So those are the three that we've accomplished now, and now we're on the fourth, one of the most important, I think, of the 7 word switches. It's the either or word switch, and either or substituting for getting rid of the either or, and we substitute both and. As we'll see, both and brings us to look at how we're connected, how we can coordinate both and, whereas either or is the way that we've been thinking for the most part, that divides us into 2 categories, us and them, good, bad, right or wrong, our tribe and their tribe, that generally is the source of wars. So this is one of the most important word switches, and now we're going to listen to Brad Shepard's recording of that word switch. So I'm going to share the screen, and in doing so, I'm sharing our computer sound, and now we're going to start this recording.
Hey, Dad, you're not sharing yet. There you go.
Welcome back to Module 2 of the Educational Community Curriculum on Making Our Life Wonderful. This is the 4th of the 7 mind-freeing, life-changing, world-saving word switches. We apply one of the most powerful critical word switches when we replace either or with both and. Either or divides the world into 2 opposing categories, whereas both and focuses on our similarities. Be amazed at how this simple substitution directs our energy to cooperation for mutual gain instead of harmful competition to assert dominance.
I consider today's trend not only the most important wisdom of the 7 mind-freeing, life-changing, world-saving word switches, it is the most important of all word switches. Recall that word switches selectively replace established action patterns that are no longer effective or have become dangerous. Word switches inspire us to apply current knowledge and common sense wisdom to create more effective solutions to today's problems. The actual task is quite easy. Simply substitute both and for our either or 2-category prevalent way of thinking. This trend explains why the both and word switch is the mature means of processing information. Both and recognizes shared interests and goals and promotes collaboration for mutual gain. It replaces the either-or thinking characteristic of immaturity that limits our perception to two opposing extremes. Either-or thinking is the root cause of bigotry, prejudice, and harmful confrontation. Both and works together with the I could and I allow word switches we require to assume responsibility for our own destiny. All individuals first learn to process data into two either-or categories we call dichotomous thinking. Neither we nor our nurturers have a choice because during our prolonged immaturity, we lack the knowledge and common sense wisdom to survive. We require decades to attain sufficient physical and mental maturity, sophisticated use of language, self-worth, and the wisdom required to free ourselves from our first masters, instinct and tradition. Others label the creative forces that first control us nature and nurture, or fate and circumstance. Instinct includes the survival of the fittest and fight-or-flight trial-and-error behaviors that were adaptive to the demands of the savage environments our early ancestors faced. Instinct is hardwired into our biology at birth. Tradition also consists of the behaviors that worked for our ancestors, but unlike instinct, we are hardwired with tradition after birth. Through repetition, our nurturer's ways become habit. Habit, passed forward from generation to generation, becomes tradition. Instinct and tradition hardwire our thinking pathways before we are sufficiently mature to resist, before we can assume personal direction of our life's experience. Our freedom organ is not fully physically mature until about the age of 18, until we become competent in common sense interpretations. The way we think remains dominated by two-category either-or thinking. Limited in common sense wisdom, for most of our first decades, we are servants to instinct and tradition. We require protection and direction to progress to the stage of maturity when we can become our own person, what we call self-mastery. Instinct and tradition consist of the rules of living that have allowed us to remain among the 2 to 3% of species that have not become extinct. We benefit from the trial and error successes and mistakes of our ancestors. Those who survive gladly pass forward for our benefit the actions that have proven successful. The action pathways, hardwired by instinct and tradition, provide quick, relatively effortless, automatic proven responses to danger. They are the mindless behaviors that direct us to survive established dangers. These hardwired action pathways are powerful because they are programmed with emotion. Let's keep in mind the fatal shortcoming of the action patterns we passively acquire from the first masters of our thinking. Instinct and tradition direct us to effectively manage yesterday's issues using yesterday's level of knowledge, but yesterday's solutions may no longer work for today's problems. Our work in progress is to selectively replace action patterns that no longer work or have become dangerous with common sense solutions using today's knowledge and wisdom. Humankind differs from all other earth creatures by the degree to which we make ourselves powerful creators of our own destiny. Our sophisticated freedom organ creates language, mentally manipulates symbols to imagine original phenomenon, and applies willpower to change the world we all share. While our creative power provides us multiple benefits, misdirected knowledge adds new problems, such as weapons with ultimate destructive power, global warming, pollution, and overpopulation. Let's consider the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction to multiple tribes who already declare their intent to use them. This is our most imminent threat to our loved ones and humanity. Either-or thinking divides the world's tribes into opposing forces, each with a mission to dominate the non-members who also have or will soon have the power of ultimate destructive weapons. Instinct survival of the fittest, and fight-or-flight perspective and tradition's repeated use of force through intimidation and war are more likely to result in destruction of the fittest instead of survival of the fittest. When we put the test of common sense to the hardwired solutions, instinct and tradition apply to new problems, we recognize their transparent foolishness. Einstein told us the one most certain way to prevent catastrophe, the unleashed power of the atom, has changed everything except our modes of thinking. A new type of thinking is essential if mankind is to survive and move to higher levels. The newer way of thinking, unlike instinct and tradition, requires actively teaching ourselves to apply universal common sense wisdom to new knowledge to solve new problems. The first and most important step is substituting mature both and processing of information for our established either-or thinking. Our work in progress is to make common sense thinking common. The either-or manner of thinking we all first learn and habitually maintain biases our interpretation of data. It limits us to two conflicting categories: either good or evil, us or them, safe or dangerous, right or wrong, okay or not okay, win or lose, on and on. If my way, my family, my team, my values, my religion, and my flag are good, right, and just, then what is not me or not us is bad, wrong, evil, lacks respect, and may be deserving of harm. Until we change our either-or way of thinking, this root cause of bigotry, prejudice, hatred, destructive aggression, and war will persist. Tribes will continue to seek or dominate other tribes. A tribe may consist of any political, religious, ethnic, or geographic group joined in a common interest. Either-or thinking demands that individuals maintain allegiance to local priorities. The shrinking world that makes everyone our neighbor now requires that we become citizens of the global community and contribute to its well-being. Both and thinking by switching or to and recognizes the positives and the negatives of each alternative choice, both right and wrong, good and bad, mine and yours, and the shared interests of us and them. Both and thinking focuses on our similarities and the power of collaboration. It promotes tolerance and common sense problem solving. It recognizes values and the pluses and minuses of each alternative. The persistence of the either-or way of thinking that we all learned during our immature years creates this dangerous creed that threatens our survival. My tribe's way is right. Any non-subscriber is inferior, is deserving of punishment, even murder, unless they become a member of my tribe. Given the present proliferation of our weapons of ultimate destruction, this outdated belief is leading to our self-annihilation. It threatens our loved ones and all of humanity. Our generation has already created sufficient nuclear destructive power to end humanity 10 times over, has put this power on 24/7 ready, release status, and has installed triggers that allow the word of one person or a mechanical error to release its fury by a single act. On an individual rather than a tribal basis, immature either-or thinking leads to the conclusion, my needs are important, others are not. Our innate drive for dominance and physical power is modified in contemporary society to include insatiable pursuit of the symbols of power and dominance. These include money, status, immortality, and rightness. Whereas animals are satisfied with enough, humankind creates the symbol for infinity to expand need to greed. No matter how much wealth some individuals achieve, enough is not enough. Emotion overrules common sense intelligence, as we observe Mr. Madoff and his many equivalents who enrich themselves without regard for the consequences to others. Either-or thinking characteristically emphasizes differences. it effectively filters out similarities. It assigns all good to one side and all bad to anything not our side. Our history is defined by its destructive aggression fought for good against evil. During war, our side is all deserving, while not our side is evil, demonized, subhuman, and therefore okay to treat without regard. If you're not with us, you're against us. A superior being or ideology is often depicted by all parties as favoring our side. Religions engage in harmful conflict on the basis of either-or thinking, even though the areas of agreement are huge and areas of disagreement are so limited. Either-or thinking supports harmful ongoing confrontation, even within the same religion. Ditto for ideologies such as a democracy, socialism, and communism. For example, we now witness Democrats and Republicans automatically opposed, irrespective of the merits of any issue. The ubiquitous conflict we see among tribes of every sort is easily explained as the outcome of remaining stuck in either-or dichotomous thinking. The most certain way to elevate ourselves, to become humane individuals, is to unite, to popularize a newer way of thinking. Both and thinking redirects our mental action pathways to apply the universal rules of logic to create effective solutions to today's issues. We need to make common sense common. The both and word switch redirects our thinking from dependence on authority to common sense problem solving. Perception is focused on our similarities more than our differences for a very logical reason. We are far more alike than different. We share interests and goals. Both and thinking recognizes collaboration's power to replace the competitive need to rule others with authority. Either-or thinking commonly lacks rational explanation and is supported only by the authority of a dictator. Dictators usually offer what is purported to be common sense justification for their claim of absolute correctness. However, when viewed by non-tribe members, the transparent, self-serving motives for power, greed, and the like rarely pass muster. The test of universal common sense invariably fails. Dictators driven by emotions usually refuse to consider common sense logic. Use this example to keep in mind how both and thinking differs from either-or thinking. When we look at a restaurant's menu, we find multiple choices that can be enjoyed. One is not all right, and the others are not all wrong. Decisions are difficult because the real world presents us with choices that have pluses and minuses on each side. Decisions are especially difficult for the perfectionist who becomes mired in obsessive-compulsive paralysis for fear of making a mistake. It is more appropriate for us to emphasize making our choice right instead of obsessing over the right choice. The great attraction of immaturity and the either-or thinking of human dictators is that life's challenges are relatively effortless and stressless when the right choice has been clearly defined. It matters little that the outcome may be catastrophic as long as we believe at the moment we are doing the right thing. Don't overlook this critical insight. Both and common sense processing of information emphasizes mental rehearsal to anticipate the future consequences of actions before choosing among alternative possibilities. This is the basis of prevention. Either-or thinking is hardwired to quickly initiate past solutions and resolve undesired outcomes by cure. We all know that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. This is especially true when there may not be a cure available, as with the unleashing of weapons with ultimate destructive power. In summary, the both and word switch is our tool to redirect the action pathways hardwired by instinct and habit to the newer way of mature problem solving using universal common sense wisdom. Both and thinking switches us from the prejudgments, bigotry, and intolerance towards the not me or not my tribe to recognize our similarities, common needs, and the benefits of collaboration and sharing. It emancipates us from childhood dependency and empowers us to assume responsibility for who we are and what we become. As we proliferate weapons with ultimate destructive power that offer no second chance, the tick, tick, ticking of the doomsday clock gets louder. The more we substitute both and for either or thinking, the slower the ticking. Working together, we can stop and reverse the clock. The alternatives are far less inviting.
Okay, so let's see now if I can stop sharing here. And we're back to our meeting. So that is the both and for either or word switch. And the floor is open for your comments.
Well, I'll start real quick. It seems that the one of the stumbling blocks in getting to, more people thinking, in a and in both way is that hardcore negotiation, Trump style negotiation has worked in the past. And therefore, to me, that's a stumbling block for thinking, for more people thinking and or both. If there were more examples of and both working, as well as the sort of hardcore negotiation, draw the line in the sand, I'm not going over that line, blah blah blah. There's a book out there that is sort of the antithesis of the Trump art of negotiation. It's also kind of called The Art of Negotiation, that really purports or really supports the and or both approach. But it dictates, well, not dictates, it suggests a more dynamic, approach than just and or both. It actually adds the fact that in real world negotiation, you may have to have a different approach as you go through the negotiation, right? So in real life, as you go through real life negotiations, using and or both is great, but you might have to also add more practical, on your feet kind of thinking, because that it may not work in all situations. Let me stop there, just get some comments. It's more fluid than just and or both. As you use and or both, that could bring people closer together, but then to get them over the line, you may need more fluidness and different tactics to get them over the line. I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, I think as much as it pains me, I agree with John. I think that the example of the menu, looking at the menu in the restaurant, and it's not that one choice is right or one choice is wrong in the example that was given, but if one of the choices on the menu will kill you, if you have a peanut allergy and you have peanut cashew chicken, and if you eat that, it will kill you. Then semantics aside, there really may be a yes or no, right or wrong, black or white choice when you're looking at the menu. And I think we can call it, well, I know if I eat this, I know I have all these choices, and if I choose to eat this one with peanuts, I know it's going to kill me. I'm not going to call it the wrong choice, but I'm just going to recognize I'm going to make another choice. So we might do that for ourselves. I don't think that we would do that for our child. If we're sitting at a menu and our table, the people around the table, and our child has a life-threatening peanut allergy, you wouldn't really explain to your kid, you can have the cashew chicken, but it'll kill you. And you couldn't even explain that to your 30-year-old if you have someone whose freedom organ is already developed. I don't think that if you noticed that there were peanuts in the thing they were ordering, you wouldn't say, well, I see you've chosen the cashew chicken, but I just want to remind you of a fatal peanut allergy. And so I hope you don't choose the cashew chicken. So I think that there is I wonder if there's a semantic thing that we're getting lost in here, because there are some choices for which the anticipated outcome is catastrophic, and such choices may actually constitute a wrong decision.
They in the book, I do love to agree with Pacey though. But they're in the book, they gave two examples of where, a more fluid approach might be in order. One is buying a house, and the other was buying a car, right? Buying a house, you might come across the dream of, your dream house, and come to negotiate and trying and or both approach to bring everybody kind of together. But then, if it's just beyond your means to, using that approach, that you might have to go switch to a more hardcore approach and just get up and walk out, right? Get up, you've reached my limit. I cannot go any further. And if they won't come to the table, you just have to walk out, right? So those were the two thoughts. Now, maybe we're not talking about buying a house, and maybe we're not talking about buying a car, but but in everyday practical situations, we are talking about bringing people together and getting them to move to a next step, right? So let me stop there and get reactions.
I'm going to go back to the menu. I as an example, I do think, I don't know if this does for negotiations, but when you go in, I'm kind of thinking the what is it, the and or thinking is like, I go into the restaurant every day and I always get a hamburger. Actually, because I'm a vegetarian, I always get a toasted cheese sandwich. I've done it ever since I was a kid. I love toasted cheese sandwiches. I'm never going to consider anything. I never order anything else. And I think the and/or isn't a matter that you have to get a cashew chicken in fear of peanut allergies. It's really more a matter of I'm going to consider the idea that, boy, there might be some additional enjoyment if I consider something other than just toasted cheese. There are these other things on here. I don't have to take them all. I don't have to take any of them. But it's just the idea of considering the idea that maybe I would enjoy the meal a little bit better if I consider some of these other choices here on occasion and not always get the same thing.
I like that. I like that. The other thought that comes to mind is about attitude, and the attitude by which you come to any negotiation. That's why I also think that some of these word switches are linked to other word switches. So, coming to a negotiation with some humility, have a little bit of humility can change the way that you approach it, right? So if you come to it a little bit humility, the and or both, and even given the menu discussion, you could instead of saying no, I always have cheese sandwiches. You're right that bring in a little different attitude to the table can open your aperture to actually consider something else, right? And I'm going to give you an and or both between what Pacey was saying and what you're saying, Avi.
I think a lot has to do with your own attitude. If you're in a position where you're up against somebody else's opinion or someone you feel like you dislike an awful lot, and you feel like if you don't win the point, then the bad guy will win. But if you kind of come in with an attitude that a person isn't all having to do with this particular interaction, but a people or an opinion has some merit and can recognize that there can be merit in the opposite number, I think it can make you feel a little better and fairer in how you negotiate. So whether you win the point or not, it may be that you don't get so involved, so you get a reaction. Don't feel that it's me against the rest of the world, but me against somebody else who cares a lot about their position, and they may have their own reasons for that, and being a little bit more understanding in that kind of an interaction.
What we use, the situation we're really dealing with, there's a hard stop, there's a hard endpoint, and that is one that, in the allergy, in the cashew allergy, it's that I'm going to watch my son order something that he's going to eat and he's going to die in front of me. I think there's no amount of, it's not confrontation or trying to win, when you're watching that about to happen. There's evolving distress, and I think regardless of rationality or fairness or either or thinking, I would think that it would escalate very quickly, that we wouldn't be able to rationally give people that freedom to say, okay, that's all right. And I know your throat's gonna close up and you're gonna die, and I'm gonna sit here and have lunch and watch you do that. I don't think any amount of well-intentioned fairness would allow a parent to watch their child do that. And I think the issue we're talking about, with the end of the world and mass destruction, is a hard endpoint. We get to a place where, when it comes right up to the moment, right up to the decision, I don't know that it's really adaptive to just watch that happen, to allow that to happen, to say, yes, I see that that you feel differently, and you feel that when you're destroyed, you will get your 7 virgins or 41 virgins in heaven. And, I appreciate that you see that. And I think we still wouldn't condone that. I guess the part I'm stuck is, we're making and negotiating a strategy to prevent world destruction. We're really talking about making decisions for other people. It's different when we go into a restaurant and we're deciding, do I want the tomato sandwich or do I want the cashew chicken? We can live with that decision, and no one really cares a great deal what we choose, unless we choose something that's so personally destructive to us that it affects someone else. So I think there's a problem in our logic, that if we each evolve individually, and I subscribe to this, I don't think that it's wrong, but I don't know if it addresses the issue that the hard endpoint is we're trying to change the behavior of somebody else. And it's not necessarily out of confrontation. Really, it's out of love. It's out of, we don't, you said a long time ago, Dad, one of the things that motivated you was the dream or the vision of, seeing your family on a railroad track and hearing the train coming. And, all rationality aside, that's a very visceral, and I think a true form of motivation that maybe for a species such as we are, we may, from a strategy point of view, may need to find a way to allow others to find their own similar motivation, to change their behavior as a way of saving their family. It may be I'm okay if the world blows up, but I would really like to see Theo, my grandson have a world to grow up in. I know for me personally, that's probably more motivating than me being able to live another 40 years. So anyway, just thinking.
Yeah, no, I like that thought process, and it brings you to but everybody has their own choice, right? So you're saying is what you're saying that the urgency, providing the urgency of the situation to people bringing them to the table to make the choice is you have to present that really, really urgent issue, because otherwise it's really not kind of a casual and or both. It really is a critical and or both, like you said on the menu, watching if someone's allergic to peanuts, or in this case world peace, right? It's a super urgent. You're gonna watch your family die, or you're going to have a really really urgent or critical needs. So consider that when you consider making these choices, or making these word switches, or finding happiness, or finding happiness.
I wonder if a strategy we're biting off more than we can chew is to say, well, we're going to change human nature first. You're going to endorse yourself, so much that it flows to enrich other people. And as a result of you making your change, then that's going to, 3 dominoes down, that's going to give us world peace. I wonder if it's, if that's too big of a bite, really. What John said, Trump, these power dynamics have come more naturally to our species, and they have a track record of working. They also have a track record of putting us in this precarious situation. But I wonder if you keep the eye on the prize of not allowing our world to blow itself up, is this the best strategy? Or is there really some combination of strategies that involve some of the older thinking that people are familiar with, that we might, if we succeeded in preventing world annihilation, but everybody wasn't self-endorsing, would that be a good enough outcome? And I think that the prize is so valuable that maybe if there are other ways we could think to get there, not including this, but not just this, and maybe including other strategies that are more Neanderthal, that might get us closer to what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, it's sort of the and both. In both.
Both and.
Yes, Sensei.
Both and both.
Yeah, I think that's true.
I think that I don't think anything is off the table, but I'm actually thinking, even back to the menu thing in this world peace, is what is it that we can do that would be influential? And one of the things that we can do, one of the things is, I don't think forcing somebody to change the behavior that has a bomb is something that's going to be hard for us to do that. But you can just sort of say that if I personally am open to different alternatives or different choices and the small things in life, like a menu. I mean, I'm not saying that when I go into a restaurant, there's a difference between saying, I'm going to try something that might harm me versus I'm going to try something different than I always eat. There's a spectrum there, and the idea that, well, I'm not going to encourage anybody else to do something that'll harm them, but I might encourage something else to do something that might open up their experience. The different levels of experience they can attain by saying, well, why don't you try something a little bit different? And likewise, in dealing with people that there's conflict, there might be conflict, that's starting off with, would I consider the idea that, well, maybe I don't need this that bad, maybe they need it, so far. I'm not going to try to beat them out of the last nickel or the last dime or whatnot. I can be open to the idea. You know, I think that's sort of a start on a road. You know, it's both and. You might have to use a stick and a carrot. But from my perspective, what this is all about is the idea of saying, well, let's consider things just in our personal lives. To start thinking if we can open up alternatives. And then if you do that enough, that maybe starts to catch on, and other people start, you know, if they see that it's working for you, it starts to take off a little bit. So, you know, I kind of see that if the goal is avoid world destruction, one has to get there is to, you know, start looking at different alternatives for yourself and considering both and that may eventually unroll its way out. But it's not, you know, it's kind of the long-term game. It's not, you know, it's something you have to go along with.
I think it was Einstein's most brilliant insight, and this is, I think, a very key point, was he recognized that the way we've been thinking for throughout history, as long as thinking has been possible, going back to our earliest animals, our ability to think, as long as thinking has been possible, it was perfectly appropriate and normal to be tribal and to think in terms of us or them. With limited resources and too many people who needed resources, unless you belonged to a tribe and began to show allegiance to that tribe and be prepared to kill people on the other tribe who also wanted the limited resources, we could not survive. So our success in why we are the 2 or 3% of species that have survived is because we have been either or thinkers. But Einstein's insight was that we are addicted to this way of thinking. And now that we have something new in the world, such as arming everyone with weapons that offer no second chance, we can't make mistakes anymore. So I think the point that John brought up at the beginning of the meeting was it's very difficult when we're addicted to a way of thinking and we haven't had good examples of a newer way of thinking that will make a difference. Now, why should people change when what's worked for 3.5 billion years, trial and error and learning? Why should we change when that's always worked in the past? And the critical issues we're not aware. We're so addicted to the old way of thinking. It's in our biology. It's what we inherit. It's what our nurturers teach us, the same old way. So here we are, we're stuck with Einstein saying we've got to come up with a newer way of thinking. That's the only answer that's going to prevent this Holocaust that he accurately predicts. And yet, what John brings up, but we don't have any examples really particularly that a different way of thinking works. This old way of thinking has always worked for us. So that's the insanity. We're trying to solve the same, that's Einstein's definition of insanity. We're trying to solve the problem with the way that caused it with the same way of thinking and expecting a different result. So getting back to Pacey and I think Abby's issues of what's practical then is, it seems to me we do have to take action, and it is more important for our own child and our own family, the people we immediately love, than world peace. That's something more tangible. Our own life is important, but for many people, it's even the people we love the most. So somehow we've got to figure a way and come up with some way that helps people realize that we are the low-hanging fruit. We are the people, if we can recognize, get over this business that we have a way of thinking that's destructive, but we're not aware of it. That's the ignorant part. Now we are becoming aware that there is something in the food that poisons us, not just the loved ones, but it poisons everybody. And that there is a choice now that we can no longer make. And if we can just think in terms of both and see how both and is the word switch that teaches us how to cooperate to mutually solve a problem. But it's only going to start with a low-hanging fruit. And guess what? That's you and me. We are it. Most of the world is very hung up in the idea that my way is the only right way. And we talked about the one meme that's been the problem. What's good for me and my tribe for now and the future. If we could just change that one meme, that what's good for my tribe and your tribe for now and the future, rather than what's good for me and my family for here and now. I'm complete here, but I think that there's some critical issues here, that we are addicted and we don't realize it.
Can you leverage the addiction as opposed to saying we need to evolve, become non-addicted? Can we leverage the addiction to say the common ground here? We're not going to get everybody on board, because I think no perspective can recruit or appeal to everybody. But I think a great majority of people might find common ground in the notion that they want to do something to save their family. Everyone can't agree that my family is the most important, but I think most people could agree that their own family and their own relatives are the most important.
Well, the problem is that most tribes, you see, because they're addicted to a way of thinking, have come to the conclusion that the answer is mutual assured destruction is mad. The more weapons we make, the more safety we have. That's the insanity that we're stuck with. So it starts with, again, I think Einstein said, unless we change our way of thinking, unless we're in the process of using these 7 word switches to change our way of thinking. And it's very difficult to get people to accept that such a simple thing as a few word changes and a few simple love creation skills can elevate the way we think from our animal brain, which is the way we've been thinking for 1 billion years, to this new way of thinking that Einstein is saying we have to teach ourselves a new way of thinking where we're saying what's good for us and them. That's very difficult. Look what's going on in our politics today. Virtually every leader, every major leader of every tribe, every country is very tribal. What's good for my country? We're seeing this in our country. I mean, we're kind of the epitome of what's good for me and my.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at just the recent tariff squabbles that have started now, it really is tribal thinking at its most. Right. Yeah. Europe is now saying they're going to tax the 20 largest digital commodities that so Apple and and all of the tech companies they're looking to target because of the steel and aluminum tariff that Trump is signing. So yeah, that's I mean, I think you're right on there. Is more of the same is just creating more of the same. I mean, the next thing is going to be China, and although
yeah, John. I mean, I think it's in my mind it's open for debate. When you kind of say that you're making a change in the position for the trade balance. I mean, I think one of the reasons that Trump is popular is because the trade has been imbalanced. That whole sections of our economy are getting wiped out because other countries are trying to grow, by developing these industries and closing down those same industries here. Is that? I think there is that. When you do sit at the negotiating table and you sort of see, well, there really are these pretty negative consequences, and there's a sense that the people who are negotiating really aren't paying those consequences, but the people are, a good part of the population are.
Right. So where's the and in both? And maybe it's.
Well, I don't think it is and in both.
Maybe this the fluidity that we talk about. Maybe you're starting with the hard line and then you move to an and in both, and we can align with Europe to bring China to the table, or the other way around. Maybe that's what we're maybe in speaking with agreeing with Pacey and what you said, Avi. Maybe it's that fluidity of using both and approaches really is the successful model. I don't know the reaction to that.
Yeah, no, I think I think that makes sense. But I think I think some of these like trade stuff, those problems, they're in my mind they're more complicated than just saying, well, we're taking an unfair tactic by just those guys off. That you know, I think there's a sense that this really isn't a both and situation, that, you know, people are giving things away that are coming at great expense, and the people who are giving away really aren't paying that expense. And there's not this sense that this isn't really good for both you and I. It's good for one side, but not nearly as good for the other side. And the people who are losing on the other side are saying, I'm not seeing the benefit. You know, you guys make a negotiation and I lose my job. Tell me how that's supposed to benefit me. And I think that's a good part of these complex situations. Is not a, you know, there's not, I was thinking the idea of the zero-sum game and the, you know, the non-zero sum game.
So when are you turning Republican?
Me? I'm with you, my friend.
Good. I'm just joking. It's a good one though.
Until we change our way of thinking, the basic root cause is the way we've been thinking for such a long time. And that's what we're having difficulty for accepting for ourselves. It's so easy to see to change other people. Remember earlier in the meetings we started with how everybody else needs to change. And now we come back to the point, until we recognize that we are part of the same addiction, then unless a certain core group of people change their way of thinking to both end, and we do it gradually. It's not all of a sudden. We do it gradually. You know, somebody brought up the idea of the stick and the carrot. You know, we can't put our defenses down. I'm not suggesting that. We have to be strong and show that we can be able to defend ourselves. But unless we offer a carrot and we try to negotiate and try to change, demonstrate ourselves that we can be different, we have to be the role models to show that something better can work, rather than the way we've been doing, which most people who look ahead can say, this is only going to lead to our mutual self-destruction. You know, if everybody arming themselves with more nuclear weapons, that's the answer that every country has come up with. No one has come up with a common sense solution yet, except Einstein's saying that the root cause is the way we think, and if we're going to change things, we have to change ourselves so that we begin to think of what's good for us and them. What we're seeing right now is escalation. You know, one person does something and then the other one says, oh, we can do it more than you. My thing is bigger than your thing. You remember this kind of controversy? And escalation is what leads up to war. So we see all the signs now that we're headed now for a major conflagration. It's only a matter of time. That's what the experts are telling us, unless we do something to change. And we're struggling with ourselves. It's hard for us to realize how important it is that we examine our own thinking and say, are we really thinking in terms of what's good for me and them? Are we willing to give up something so that we share?
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, if I push that a bit, Dad, I'm not sure. What is it that if you're negotiating with somebody who wants your destruction, you know, you're sort of it's kind of what is the common ground? What is the both and? You know, how do you?
Let me give you an example. If there was a wild animal that was attacking you, there's no negotiation. If you have a gun, you have to kill that wild animal. And if we would start with the assumption that everybody, all the other tribes have that assumption, then it's true. I mean, we have to go back to what's worked in the past. We have to be prepared to bomb them and kill other people before they kill us. I mean, that's part of we see that in some of the more primitive ways of management and so on. So, but we make the assumption that the other side is incorrigible, that there's no way of changing. But part of that's our distorted thinking. If we can try to find a way, and it gets back to common sense, if we can find a way first to convince ourselves that we need to change, we become the role model that may be able to convince other people that there's a better way than making more bombs. I don't know whether it could be that we just have to say it's too far, it's too late right now. And yes, the answer is we have to drop our bombs on others, have a sneak attack, as the Japanese had a sneak attack on us in Pearl Harbor. We have to have a sneak attack, kill them before they kill us. That is the way every tribe is thinking. Einstein is telling us is that it's only a matter of time now before somebody does push the button. And when the bombs are released this time, it just won't be one bomb or two bombs that have the power of a Nagasaki or Hiroshima bomb. It's going to be thousands of bombs that have 10, 20, or 50 times the power of the Hiroshima Nagasaki bomb. And there is no second chance. The only thing we can do is prevention, but we don't know how to think about prevention. If people wait until they have their first heart attack before they decide they're going to go on a diet. But that is the way we think. And until we recognize we're not equipped for this, we're innately biologically addicted, we've got to first recognize that, become the example. And that's the way, that's to me what I see as the only possibility to really move ahead. But it's very difficult because I see the difficulty in, we are the most advanced group, I think, in many ways. We are the low-hanging fruit. We are the change, but we don't recognize it. It's easy to look in terms of what other people have to do, but it has to start with a small group. I see people all over the world now forming peace groups and saying, this is a real situation. That's the hope. I think if we teach ourselves some of the most basic skills of a newer way of thinking and get other tribes to do the same, that we're waiting for this now. No one has come up with an answer yet except Einstein's answer. And I think hopefully we can create that message. That's my particular nonsense, if you want to think of it as nonsense. So
You got to run. I'll see you later.
Let's end our meeting now with the last comment, and then we'll end our meeting. Please make your last comment, and then we'll end our meeting.
Well, I'd like to make a comment about and a plug for a book I read called "Let There Be Water" and what the Israelis are doing in the Middle East. While everybody is flexing their muscles publicly, Israel has been going in and teaching some of the Arab countries how to provide more water to their people, and in cooperation with Israel, and using water from sewage plants, being able to reclaim water for agriculture. And so sometimes what you see, what you hear in the papers, or see read in the papers, or see on television, doesn't address to what's going on behind the scenes. So maybe it's behind the scenes advocacy that might eventually help this thing work. I think you don't think of two more adversarial groups than the Israelis and the Arabs, but they seem to be at some level able to work together. So maybe that could be a model.
That makes some sense. That makes sense, Marilyn. I like that. I like that approach.
When you do something nice for other people, they're willing to try to do something nice for you, isn't that so? Or if you do something that's offensive to other people, what can you expect from other people?
Right. It's very rare that you offend other people and they do something nice for you.
Any other last comments before we end our meeting? Okay, so all right, we've had an interesting discussion. This is, as we've said, is a very important word change. And we'll hope to see you next week again. And remember, we start at 9:30. See if we can get here on time, and then we can try to get our hour in and not go over time, because we know people have other things they have to do. So lots of love to everybody, and we'll end this meeting. I'm going to stop the recording at this point.